Hello everyone, it is me, Puy. This is a bit of a tough video to make, but I wanted to give everyone an explanation and say thank you for all the good times. Title's not clickbait. Modified GOAT format as of today is out of my hands and for the most part likely done as we know it. We'll get to that in a bit. I'm going to explain everything, explain my reasoning for pulling the plug, but before I do, I want to give the biggest shout outs and honors and really highlight all the amazing players who decided to roll out. This has been coming for a while, and I decided that we'd have Grand Puy 3 that just happened over the past Sunday be our final test as to whether or not the format will keep going. I said to myself, if we get over 32 players, I will without a doubt continue. We still have a following. If we have 16 players, I will consider continuing based off of other circumstances about turnout and results and competitiveness and expressed enjoyment and desire. We got 12, which is really bad. All of our modified monthlies didn't even make 8 without myself, so I knew that the format was going to a pretty bad place going into this new list, and the new list only made it worse. So, I really want to give all of those 12 players a huge shout out for coming. Everyone had their reasons for not coming. For those of you who didn't come because you decided the meta's terrible, I hope you take a look at these lists and see how wrong you are about everything. For the folks who just had other stuff to do, I appreciate you because a lot of you had brought your support and your creativity to the format previously. But for those 12 players who decided to roll up and give it their all, I'm so excited to show off your lists and everything that you innovated because it was really super cool. Alright, let's check it out. So, let's start off with our 3 droppers in Deadest of Last with an O2 drop. Nonetheless, carrying something very cool to the table, we have Rough Sleeper with this Fire Princess burn deck. Now, Rough Sleeper is doing something super cool here with Dark Lord Marie. If you don't know this card, and I forgot it was even in GOAT format at all, if it's in your graveyard, once per standby phase, you gain 200 life points. Now, usually, it's somewhat impractical to try to get Marie into the graveyard, but with the addition of Mirage of Nightmare, you can in fact draw multiple Maries at once and discard them before your next turn even starts. Each Marie activation will trigger a Fire Princess, so even one Marie with one Fire Princess is 500 a turn, but 2 Maries with 1 Fire Princess is 1,000 a turn. 2 Maries with 2 Fire Princesses, that goes up to 3,000 a turn, or 2,000 a turn, and it gets pretty nasty from there. The deck's also running Solemn Wishes to have the same effect with the Princess, and it's also running 1 Ring of Destruction because it's a good card, and only 1 Magic Cylinder, which I'm not sure about the rationale on this when 3 were available, and it's a really good card. In the sideboard, I personally don't agree with the Barrel Behind the Door because the deck just gains so much life anyway that you're probably always going to win Burn Mirrors, but you have a card to gain life against spell-heavy decks. We got Breaker, presumably for enemy decrees, more attack prevention, counters to life gain, and this deck is pretty sweet. At the end of the day, it still has to protect Fire Princess with its life in order to win, which is a really hard thing to do when Whale is at 3 and prevalently played. It's got 1500, so it dies to Bottomless, including on a flip summon, so this is a pretty uphill battle, and ultimately Rough Sleeper ended up dropping 0-2, but nonetheless, really cool deck to rep. Then we have Bakara. Bakara has been playing Ultimate Offering Monarchs in every format in this community he can. He's played it for the last list, he played it for Standard GOAT, and he brought it back now. I've seen pretty minimal changes to what it was versus the original versions, except that he added his second Breaker because Breaker is really good, and he ended up going, I believe, 1 and 2 and dropping as well. Moving on, we have Michelle over here with a Warrior deck. Now, this Warrior deck looks extremely good. If I had to put my money looking at all 13 decks as to which one would win, I would have chosen this one. Because the Blade Knights are super solid against the flips. We have no Spy, so it doesn't have its most common counter. It makes amazing use of 2 Exiled Force and 2 Breaker. The Reapers are a really solid threat against combo decks, and also a really good way to defend yourself against other aggressive decks. And the deck is just so good at going 1 for 1, but it can sneak in extra value in more ways than usual. And that's what I would say, except that this player seems to have forgotten Premature Burial. Premature Burial, especially with a second Exiled Force, was going to be super duper helpful. And I'm not saying that not playing the Premature through the entire tournament, but the kind of player who's not going to bring premature to their warrior deck might also be making some other play mistakes during the play. It happens. But this deck seems like it is super strong and one of my favorite picks to win the tournament. Unfortunately, Michello, I believe, ended up 1-3 before a drop. Also important to mention about this deck that in addition to the premature burial mistake, he didn't realize BLS was banned. So what we ended up making him do after the first round, the moment we noticed it, was he put the Sork in the sideboard into the main board, took out the BLS, and he had to play with a 14-card sideboard. That's how we kept it fair, but it didn't end up mattering too much. Some people came in real quick, and we wanted to make sure everyone had the chance to play. But yes, there is a BLS in this image. No, he did not play BLS in the tournament. So moving on to our players who stuck it out till the end, we're starting in 9th place with Sol de Sol. Now this name should be familiar with you because he is the champion, if I believe, of Grand Puy 2, playing a control deck and also repping control for most of the modified monthlies. He decided to go with something different because he had been experimenting a lot. Now this player, and we'll talk about this later, really has had the absolute most love and energy for this format possible. He really doesn't like playing with Delinquent Duo, but likes playing Goat format, to the point where he only wants to play Modified, which, a lot of respect. He decided today to really put a lot of our new inclusions to the test. This was the main GGH deck we saw for the day. Good Goblin Housekeeping was at 3, and he decided to combine it with Thunder Dragon. Of course, the Thunder Dragon is 2 cards you can put back with each of the copies of GGH, and then, of course, getting more cards with Mirage of Nightmare. Notably, this deck doesn't seem super good at removing Mirage, so I'm not so sure about that. At the end of the day, this unfortunately didn't work as hoped, even with the very cool OTK and the somewhat slow card draw focus control plan. Sol did end up going 0-4 with a tie. I do respect the innovation, and I'm so glad he decided to come out. Following up in 8th place, we have H2O Pro with Fire Cat. Yes, the Water Pro brought the Fire Cat. This was the only cat deck represented, despite the fact that Swag Cat was actually expected to be a very, very strong contender for today's meta. Now, Fire Cat is super sweet because you get the inclusion of Ultimate Baseball Kid. Little Chimera acts as your Milus, and basically most of the rest of the deck functions the same way. The sideboard gets a serious upgrade because we get the 3 magic cylinders, which makes going into burn mode with Panda way easier without having to both play Just Desserts and Gravity Bind. You just have your wheels and your cylinders. I think that was a really good idea. So thank you to H2O Pro for coming out. I am very curious how a Swag Cat deck would have done, but as we'll see later, there is one more cat inclusion. And it was Dukirky, also tied for that little last bracket. He was playing Cat Gate. Now this deck is super sweet. This is the closest we got to Swag Cat, but it did have the variance of Reasoning and Gate. It also had some super sweet includes, including Behemoth, the King of All Animals, which, because it can be tributed for 1 monster, is a will trigger in a pinch. So there's a lot of good stuff here. I really enjoyed watching this deck play as well. Now we're moving into our top 6. We have Raven's Anger, longtime Mgoat player Raven's Anger playing Skilled Magician Beatdown, I think I'm going to call it. So the cool thing about the Skilled Magicians is that they can summon their targets from the graveyard, which means they will trigger the cards of Safe Return. So if you have a card of Safe Return, you're not only getting the bigger body, you're drawing a card. Very notably, BLS is no longer in the format and Sork is only at 1, so Buster Blader and Dark Magician are very likely some of the strongest beat sticks on the field. And if they're not getting destroyed by a card being used, like Regeki Break or a removal or some destroy effect, versus being destroyed by battle, this deck is pretty good at bringing it back and drawing a card while doing it. This deck also takes advantage of Mirage of Nightmare with Mystical Space Typhoon and also the 2 Raigeki Breaks, so that's pretty great. He did decently well. I think it was a 2-3 finish or a 3-2 finish. Yes, 3-2, which is super duper cool for a deck like this. It looks like it's pretty bad on paper, but it must have been really strong. Of course, a bunch of 1900 beat sticks is no joke. Toon Gemini Elf, even if it can't attack the turn it's summoned, is no joke. 1900, that's discarding your cards. So I really, really like this a lot. In 5th place, we have Shiny Umbreon with Good Old Earth Aggro. With a second exiled force and actually playing the Premature Burial, this deck was certainly a force to be reckoned with, I'm sure. Pure aggressive power, an additional Breaker as well. This is another deck that makes amazing use of it, especially because Breaker hits over Whale, which is quite good. So I have no doubt that this deck performed amazingly. Congratulations on the 5th place run for Shiny Umbreon. Now, we're about to get into our top 4. These are the players who perform best in Swiss. Keep in mind that our 4th place player won on Breakers, which means that these two players both just as easily could have gotten into top 4 based off how the cards fell. So these decks were also well performers. Congratulations to both of them. We're going to start off with our other 3-2 player, Angel Valentinov. And we have here something absolutely crazy. This is Dragon Xingchen Spice Beatdown thing with an Apprentice engine as well. Kind of crazy to be playing 3 Metamorphosis with no goats and a bunch of level 2s in the deck, but you also have the level 1 Faith for Terra if you need it. And of course, the main point is to use it on 6 or 7, because you can get King Dragoon to go into your Kaiser Glider or to go into your Mirage Dragon, untargetable threat. You have protection with Interdimensional Matter Transporter, which is really great because there are so few things that can stop King Dragoon that if you just blink it out of existence for half a second against that one thing, you probably don't get it outed again for the rest of the game. Of course, Earth Aggro probably performs really well against this because you have all of the ways to remove it with the 3 Assailants and the Lady. But nonetheless, this deck is super duper sweet. We have the combo of Anti-Spell Fragrance and Jingsenhu, which means that your opponent has to set their spells, and then you lock them down because they can only set one card if they want to actually be able to activate stuff, which is super duper cool. I have no idea how this performed so well, but Angel has a way of making amazing things work. So congratulations on the 3-2. Congratulations on the top 4. Let's move on to another long-time GOAT stan, Infusion's Cap. And he's playing straight up Chaos Turbo. All the people who said that Chaos Turbo wasn't going to be able to perform well, here it is in top 4. You don't see any Cat. You don't see any Burn. Chaos Turbo made top 4 with a 4-1 record. First in Swiss, if I'm not mistaken. It might have been 5-0. Performed amazingly, even without Spy. He's got great defensive options. Reaper, good defensive option. And of course, DD Warrior Lady, good defensive option. Breaker the Magical Warrior is an amazing dark and it is an amazing offensive option, but of course, it probably doesn't get you hit over too well. I can see this performing well even against a lot of Warrior decks, but it did end up falling to Warrior, which we'll get to. Yes, Chaos Turbo and Warrior still were the winning decks in the top 4 for this event, but it's a super solid list, and it's great to see that Chaos Turbo still had a place in this meta. Second place, we have Fresh IRL, the Golem God, bringing an insane Reasoning Gate build. Now, the main deck is pretty standard, what you would expect from a Reasoning Gate build relative to the Mgoat changes. In our list number 2, we had Not So Fast playing a light-based Reasoning Gate deck, but this deck was doing perfectly well using Chaos Sorcerer, Dark Magician of Chaos, and Reincarnation to still be able to set up the Defuse, which honestly I'm pretty impressed with, seeing all of this. We also have Mirage of Nightmare, which he has elected to use the 1 allowed emergency provisions, and also using MST because True Need is at 1, so it's a very simple way to be able to get all of that together. Going for the full 3 Metamorphoses, which is important both for the main plan to slow down the game because we have less Chaos Sorcerers and need to play a little bit slower, but also this side plan has Golem control in it. The Golem will mill over on your Reasoning and your Gate, so you don't actually have to not play it. You can put Golem in without changing anything if you need to. Golem can remove any 2 monsters, gets locked down by all of these floodgates. We put back level limit area beta 1. You can bounce it again if you need to, or you can bounce other monsters. And then you also have the answer. The frickin' answer. You've got 2 copies of Spell Canceller and 3 copies of Royal Decree, so this deck had a lot of different ways to play, and it brought him all the way to the final match, where he finally fell to Glow Moss 96, playing this insane Warrior deck. There is so much going on here that I can't even begin to understand it, but obviously, again, with the Breaker and the Exiled both at 2, that was a really good option. This particular player electing to main only 1 Breaker, side the other, which I don't hate. Decided we don't need Sork in the main, don't need it, don't have to care about it. If we bring in more lights, we can use it then. Other decks might have more use for it, but wanted to stay low to the ground. We've got the Smashing Ground, we've got the one of Time Seal, the one of Royal Decree, the one of Jar of Greed. So there is a lot happening here. The one of Tomato package up into Reaper and Sangan, of course. So there is a lot of versatility that made this deck very unpredictable. And at the same time, I'd say that a lot of this is definitely like a fun police deck, which is good. What I was most surprised about was to not see Solemn. I'm very curious how well that played out, but clearly it went and it worked quite well. So, again, congratulations to Glowmoss96 for winning the last ever Grand Puy, Grand Puy 3, and congratulations to these 4 players in total for their amazing innovations and play. Thank you so much again to everyone who decided to play. Let's talk about where the format goes from here. So, with all of that out of the way, let's talk about the end of Modified Goats. It was quite a project, spanning, 2.5, 3 years. It started off, as you may know, in December or January, February, around there, of 2023, 2024, or maybe 2024, 2025, but I think it was 2023, 2024. And what's important to know about GOAT format around then was JDZ was in charge, and I was quite tight with JDZ. Not that I'm not tight with my fellow staff now, but JDZ and I worked with a lot, and he was one of the biggest supporters of this format. And the reason why we were in big support of this format, seeing the writing on the wall, what we thought was the writing on the wall, was that at the time Chaos Turbo was like tier 0.5, maybe going on tier 0. Every single Turbo deck played 3 Jar Greed, 3 Regeki Break, 3 Trap Dust Shoot, and nothing could beat it. You couldn't go a single game without getting hit with Trap Dust Shoot, like at least twice, and it looked like Turbo was going to take over everything, and it was awful. And not only that, this had been the 3rd time that when the meta had bounced back, Chaos Turbo bounced back to the meta, and not only reclaimed its place in the meta, but became the dominant deck again, completely tier 1, tier 0, to the point where it started to feel like this was going to be forever. Dust Shoot and Duo in particular are awful cards. They are very unfun, terrible cards. They can play an important role in the game, but there's a reason they have been banned forever. There is a reason they were the first cards that got banned in Mgoat, and so I really wanted to make a format for starters that took out those feel-bads. My take on those cards were perfect information. It has a way of removing the skill testing, but overall, it was just a very feels-bad card. When it comes to Delinquent Duo, to this day, people wonder why it was only Duo. Graceful Charity and Pot of Greed are both cards that can be used to leverage and win a game. They can be used to sack, but they are also very importantly comeback cards. Once in a while, you will be losing a game and you will draw a Pot of Greed, and having 2 cards instead of 1 will put you back into a game, and that certain amount of variance is enjoyable. The truth of the matter is that people like to sack. The difference between Pot of Greed and Graceful Charity versus Delinquent Duo is that a good player will still outplay a bad player when they have additional cards. But a good player cannot outplay a bad player when they have less cards, because less cards means less options and less ability for skill expression. So the more that your options are limited from the get-go, the less you can actually play a real game of anything. So I wanted to take those out primarily. Whether or not on a long enough timeline we would have hit Pot of Greed and Graceful Charity and maybe put in other sack, that's another question. So those are the 2 things. And moving on from there, we lost JDZ. JDZ ended up doing projects for Lorcana, which is amazing. I'm super duper happy for him. He seems to be doing amazing over there. And Mgoat, I played out the Grand Puy. We got to the Grand Puy 2. We made the list. We made the second list. And attendance just started dropping for quite a few reasons. Now, for starters, we always knew that this format was never meant to fix GOAT format and just be an objectively better GOAT format. What we did intend, JDZ and I, was to create an exciting new GOAT format that you could play and that would be constantly changing without straying too far away from the spirit. A game that constantly changes is good and it breeds innovation. And when that is done by printing cards by a company, power creep is inevitable. But what we were going to do was going to require constant adaptation without any risk of power creep and without any burden on anyone's wallets, because there's no burden on anyone's wallets when it's all digital cardboard and it's all the same card pools. So we had hopes that it would become a very legitimate contender for serious GOAT format play, that GGPs could start to have modified GOAT side events, and there was even some talk at some point about winning enough modified GOATs turning into a standard GOAT Worlds invite. And that got shut down very quickly because there were a lot of people that were concerned that we wanted to replace standard GOAT, which at the time, I'm going to be honest, I wouldn't have mind if modified GOAT overtook standard GOAT. We ended up concluding that modified GOAT cannot be any sort of replacement for standard GOAT. It is meant to be a pressure valve for when standard GOAT gets stale. And you know what? That's exactly what it did. We intended it to be a format that constantly changed and kept things excited. We knew we couldn't keep everyone happy. We knew people would always be complaining. We knew people would always have their opinions. We knew we would have to keep changing the list. And this third list was no exception. As if things weren't bad enough before, we'll get to why. People decided that this list was awful, that I just wanted to push Burn and Cat, and that I wanted to kill Turbo, and that this list was just going to be OTK central. As you saw from those decks, that was very, very far from true. And I knew that going in. I knew that if Cat and Burn got too dominant, there was counterplay that existed in the format. I knew that I had put that counterplay in and very well limited counterplay. True Nade at 1 makes those decks just not as good as they are in Standard GOAT. And if you can't beat them with the current level of power they have, that's a get good thing. Because clearly, even these few players with basically their pet decks could get the job done just fine. Chaos Turbo was still playable. Warrior was still playable. Earth Aggro was still playable. Reasoning Gate was playable. Kaiser Glider Xingzhen Hu Spice deck was playable. The whole format was diverse. No two decks looked exactly alike. It didn't need Spy. It didn't need BLS. It didn't need the Trinity gone. There was still plenty to do, but it didn't matter. And it was never about that. What it was about, and what it was always really about, was whether or not there would be proper competitive support and incentive to play, and if there was even incentive to provide that support. And the answer was no, there wasn't. There were a lot of people complaining that the format wasn't necessary, that it wasn't actually that different from Standard GOAT. A lot of people who only played when there was an incentive available. The original 2 Grand Puys both had many more people, but I was offering a cash pool, which is just, A, not something I could do at this time, but B, I wanted to really see this format's merits on its own. And I wasn't surprised to see a lot of the War League grinders and the Worlds grinders not play in this particular event. I was a little more surprised to see people who really enjoyed a brew and wanted to bring the spirit of the format. People who had financially supported the format in previous events didn't only not do that, which I didn't ask them to, but they also just didn't have it marked on their calendars to play, and they just had stuff to do that weekend. Which, again, no hate to everyone, but it really shows what the format stands. Where does the format stand? I was wrong about Standard GOATs, and I couldn't be happier. When I created Modified GOATs, we had a 3 Dust Shoot turbo-dominant format, and maybe Warriors on the side as well. Burn just swept Worlds for the 2nd time in a row. Gumo Sumo, a deck that did not exist until a single player just kept spamming it over and over again, just won GOAT Format Championship 25. In 2nd place was a new variant of Rescue Cat OTK using the Swag engine, which was an acronym, Steinwell Archer GOATs, that in itself didn't exist until 2 years ago when Sight started jamming those decks and its core was identified and emulated by other players. I just managed to make Magic Lantern control work in GOAT format, and now I changed that into a Pac-Man deck, and the Pac-Man deck is going crazy. Chaos Return finally had its final amount of usage that it really deserved, which made Warrior stocks go up, which made Chaos Turbo stocks go down, which made Chaos Control stocks go up. The format looks nothing like it did years ago. It looked nothing like it did last year, and I know for a fact that someone's going to figure out something or other, and it's going to change again. I cannot stress this enough. Standard GOAT is going to be fine. And I wish I realized that a lot sooner. I am glad to have created this special thing and that given people the chance to enjoy it and to experiment with it and to use it at the time that we needed it. But it doesn't feel like it's needed right now. And the most important reason why I'm pulling the plug and removing my own involvement is because I'm not having fun with it anymore. and I haven't been since the emergency ban of Spy. All the upkeep has been exhausting. It's been an uphill battle. People who previously supported me have been obstructing me or otherwise uninvolved and withdrawing themselves, and that's okay. I have a few people who are my strongest shooters who have been pulling me along, which is so appreciated. We have Livio. Livio was a player who had run a locals, but big thanks to Livio. Big thanks to Infusion's Cat. Big thanks to Raven Anger. Both of them have still been putting out modified GOAT content, from duels of random decks just for ideas to a whole ban list review, which was super cool. You can see their predictions and line them up to this top 12 video if you want. Of course, all the folks who were in the Mgoat community, no matter how much or how little you were around, I appreciate you. That was Fungus, Cub, MMF. I hope I'm not forgetting everyone. I think it was also Cap. All of you helped me make the list into something great, because I'll tell you, on my own, the list would have been worse. For all you think it could have been, it was worse before we made some changes, but I think we really made something amazing, and I appreciate the people who were involved. But most of all, I really want to point to Soul. Soul was the person who really gave this format the most love, because I wasn't having any fun. No fun setting it up, no fun playing the matches, no fun running the tournaments. I've wanted to be done for quite a bit of a while. But his love for this game and this particular format is what kept me going. He was the one who created the graphic for the current ban list. He was the one who helped test a bunch of lists to say if there were any issues with the ban list, so he wasn't directly involved in its creation, but he definitely advised. He's had plenty of ideas. He's given all the infinite interest. He's volunteered to run the event on a day I couldn't. And all of this is why I am handing it over to him. I don't have anything to show you. I don't think anything to tell you yet. If that changes, there will be a link right there. But until that time, know that he is working on a server. He is working on infrastructure for Modified GOAT to be its own standalone thing. So yes, I am pulling the plug on me running this format, on goatformat.com supporting this format, on us hosting it. We're going to archive all of that information. If there's anything you want, please feel free to request it to me in the comments or on Discord. I'll get you anything you need. I can't do like the whole thing at once, but I'll do whatever I can to help people get what they need from that. And once Soul puts up the server, I'll try to put as much of that archive in there, and it's for him to run. I don't know where it's going to go from there. That's on you guys, the players. If you want to make this format your own, if you want your voice heard and you think that you know what to do, I'd say that the thing you have to do most is play and put your money where your mouth is, because so far that's not what's really happened. People before were showing the Turbo was still the best deck, and they did so. They got in the top 8. So I made a list where they thought it was dead. They didn't come up. It still did well. Not dominant, but it did well. So I think really getting involved, really playing, offering to run the tournaments, making sure you make it, whatever structure he goes with. I'm sure he's going to poll about something, ask about what kind of experience and format you want. If you still want Modified GOAT, it will exist in some capacity. And I appreciate you for sticking it out with me till the end, and I hope you have the most fun. For me personally, this is going to be the end. For goatformat.com, this is going to be the end. And thank you all for the wonderful ride. I hope you have a lovely day.